Did you know that Israel is one of the most linguistically diverse countries for its size on the planet? Which languages are spoken in Israel, by who, how many, and what's the context? This is Benjamin, and we'll uncover that in this video. To give a brief bit of context, what's the history with languages here? In brief, Proto-Hebrew was spoken by 3,000 years ago, and then Biblical Hebrew. But at the time, this language was called Yehudit, the language of Judah. Hebrew was gradually displaced by Aramaic, the language of Jesus. You might know that one. There are some Aramaic speakers in Israel today. That was the lingua franca of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the Achaemenid Empire. Judah was the last region to hold out, but by the 3rd century of the Common Era, Hebrew was lost as a vernacular language, but it was kept. Always as a liturgical language, Hebrew is an intrinsic part of following Judaism, so it was kept. Arabic began to come in from the mid-7th century as a colonial and administrative language. But in the modern era, we're talking in the 1920s, British Mandate for Palestine, Hebrew and Arabic were both put forward as official languages. And this is important for Hebrew's case because this was really the first time in modern history of any sense that Hebrew had official recognition from anywhere. And this was in the Constitution of Mandatory Palestine under the British Mandate. And much of this constitution was put forward by Herbert Samuel, a Zionist Jew MP who was appointed by Prime Minister David Lloyd George, a Welshman. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. See my video about him, by the way. And the Constitution was amended in 1939 as follows. All ordinances, official notices, and official forms of the government and all official notices of local authorities and municipalities in areas to be prescribed by the order of the High Commissioner shall be published in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. With the rebirth of Israel in 1948, the requirement for English was scrapped. As I mentioned, these early British Mandate articles were the first to make Hebrew official, and this was important for the early Zionist movement. Eliezer ben Yehuda had revived the language for every purpose a generation earlier, and the growth was miraculous, though it was a way for Jews to be unified, so it made sense. Within a generation from the 1880s, Hebrew had been revived as a spoken language in its own land and given official status, along with being used to unite Jews from abroad, from around the globe who needed a common language. Yiddish, a Germanic language with heavy Hebrew influence, contended with Hebrew for a time to be the dominant language, and this has left its influence on Hebrew today. The war between Yiddish and Hebrew is another video. Let me know if you want that one, yeah? But we'll get to Yiddish later in this video. Which brings us to Hebrew. Today, Hebrew is the majority language in the land of its birth. Something no language has ever done before. Not just revive itself as a spoken community language, but in the place it was lost. Over half now speak Hebrew as a first language, 53%. That's remarkable. I mean, we're talking in just over a century, really. Everything, from university to business and government, is in Hebrew. And most of the rest speak Hebrew fluently as a second language. All Jews returning to Israel under the law of return are allowed a free course in an ulpan, an intensive Hebrew study school. This ulpan, this intensive study school, Some of we Welsh have basically imitated its ways of immersion in the language. It works. Hebrew pioneered it. Today, over 90% of Israeli Jews are able to speak Hebrew, if not as a first language, then as a second language. And 60% of Israeli Arabs speak Hebrew. It's even taught from a very young age now in Arabic language schools, which makes sense if you want to be a part of Israeli society, and which brings us to the Arabic language. Arabic speakers have more rights and privileges than any other linguistic minority in the entire Middle East. I can't really stress that enough. Arabic speakers in Israel have more rights and privileges than any other minority in the Middle East. Whilst Hebrew is the state language of Israel, Arabic does have special status. I should note this is literary Arabic. Because of the Islamic conquests and colonizations, there are dozens of different kinds of Arabic. MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, is the official standard in Israel. This has a legitimate use, the Arabic language, in the Knesset or Israeli parliament, though it's not spoken often there. It has the right to be, as well as local authorities, signs, television stations, schools, and even an Arabic language academy, which promotes the study, history, and culture of the Arabic language. If I were an Israeli, not only would I be deeply proud of the Hebrew language revival, which has allowed this great flourishing of culture again, but the fact that Arabic is cared for, given an institute which promotes its culture and literature, road signs, schools, right to speak in Knesset, despite being surrounded by Arabic speakers who want to kill you, showing that level of empathy and humanity, I would be very proud, as an Israeli, of my Arabic-speaking community. That Arabic is a flourishing community within that state. I'm not saying there are no social problems in Israel with Arabic communities. There are, but that's not within the scope of this video. Israel's Muslim population is about 18%, and most of these speak Arabic, clearly. But also most Jews in Israel did not come there from Europe. Mizrahi Jews, or those forced out of Arab lands, account for just over half of all Israeli Jews, and a large group of them still speak Arabic. From what I gather, most of them are slowly being absorbed into Hebrew, but it is significant enough so that over 20% of Israel speaks Arabic. There is also the Druze, an ethno-religious group of their own. Their faith has instantaneous reincarnation and a cosmic mind. And they have their own dialect of Arabic. There are 120,000 of them in Israel. There are more outside of Israel, but 120,000 Druze in Israel. So for a country Israel's size, the size of Wales, that is significant. Arabic is widespread in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and from what I understand, if you're proficient in Arabic or got a keen tongue for it, you can get better placements because they need to be able to talk with people in like the West Bank and Gaza and stuff. So there are three main dialects of Arabic in Israel. The Central Palestinian variety, which is actually closest to modern Standard Arabic, and the northern bit, which includes the Druze, which is very much closer to Lebanese Arabic. And in the south you have the Bedouin in the Negev desert, which speak their own dialect of Arabic. So that's a very rich mixture. Over 20% of Israelis are fluent in Russian. When the Soviet Union was clearly teetering by the late 80s, a massive flood of Russian Jews came into Israel, but not just from Russia. This was the Soviet Union. These included other groups of Jews making Aliyah to Israel. This included non-Russian groups like Krychaks, a Jewish community from the Crimea, as well as Georgians and Central Asian Jews, many of whom brought their own languages. Today, 1.5 million Israelis speak the language. Doctors use the language in hospitals, and Israel has set up a Russian language television station, Channel 9, in 2002. There were quite a few newspapers in the 90s and early noughties, but as technology progresses, that's less so. Still, from what I understand, Russian speakers in Israel do listen to radio a lot. There's shop fronts, entire neighborhoods where it's clearly a main language, so that's a lot. And that's left a heavy, deep influence upon Israeli society. 1.5 million people speaking this language today. That's enormous. Though these children, the descendants of the Russians, do have lower birth rates than many other groups, and so they're being more easily absorbed, from what I understand, into Hebrew, which I'm sure is strengthening the Hebrew language. Yiddish is a West Germanic language. But when Jews moved north out of the Italian peninsula into the Holy Roman Empire during the 9th century, they began fusing with the native culture along the Rhine Valley. And this gave birth to a new language, Yiddish. It has a lot of German. It's mainly German, but it has a lot of Hebrew, and it's written in the Hebrew script, mostly. The speakers of this language slowly spread out into Central and Eastern Europe. So how did they get to Israel? Prior to World War II, there were 11 million Yiddish speakers worldwide. But the Holocaust hit right at the epicenter of their culture in Central Eastern Europe, and they lost a lot of speakers. Not only that, the survivors escaping, many going to Israel, were absorbed into the Hebrew-speaking community, or in America, many into the English-speaking community. So they were hit twice. But many did survive, and Yiddish has survived. Many have gone into the Haredim and Hasidic communities. You might know them as ultra-Orthodox today. And due to their high birth rates, Yiddish is growing again, albeit causing tensions. But that's outside the scope of this video. Whilst in the past, Yiddish and Hebrew fought for dominance within Jewish society in Israel, that argument is over. It is Hebrew. But Israel now acknowledges its responsibility to make sure this part of Jewish culture survives. And in 1996, the Knesset passed a law founding the National Authority for Yiddish Culture to support Yiddish literature, art, and culture. Bnei Brak, on the central coastal plain, is very Yiddish today, where Hasidic Jews are the majority. Worldwide, Yiddish has about 600,000 speakers, with 250,000 in Israel and growing, another 250,000 in America, and 100,000 elsewhere, scattered about, but it's expected to grow in Israel. At first, with the establishment of the State of Israel, French was used as a diplomatic language in Israel, but English was phased in over that on the passports in the 1990s. Why? 20% of Israel has some knowledge of French. 300,000 people are completely fluent in French in Israel. And 2%, just as the number is in English, 2% of Israel are native French speakers. But in the 1960s, France was embroiled in wars in Africa. And that complicated its relationship, its alliance at the time, with Israel. And when Israel wanted to join the Francophonie, the organization, which is basically a French cultural league, Arabic nations around Israel denied its entry. But French on Israeli passports were phased out to English nonetheless. Today, English is needed as a second language for both Hebrew and Arabic students and for receiving the Bagrut, a matriculation certificate like a diploma. And for many universities, English is needed. And due to decades and decades of influence by America, American culture is coming in, and the English that's influencing Israel tends now to be North American rather than British. Come on, guys. Spell it with an S, not a Z. Realize. Most Israelis now have a basic level, and like many places globally, the more secular areas with educated or high socioeconomic status, English is common there. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm not taking a political stance on that, that's just how it is. Only 13% of Israelis have no English skills whatsoever. Since the Roman conquest and forced exile of Jews have been flung to the four winds of the earth, literally. And those languages which they came into contact with are now coming with them back to Israel. And it led them to create some like Yiddish. This was a multicultural blooming that was flung across the globe. Yiddish was not the only language Jews created when they collided with other cultures that's come back to Israel with them. You have Bukhari. Bukharic is spoken by 30,000 Jews in Israel. They speak a language that's very much mutually intelligible with Persian, Judeo-Greek, Judeo-Malayan, a language from southern India, Judeo-Italian, which is an endangered language, Judeo-Spanish or Ladino, which I made a video on. It's a fusion of Old Spanish with Hebrew. That's got under 50,000 speakers in Israel. However, the Israeli government has given it an authority to promote it. Autoridad Nacional de Ladino. Hopefully there'll be a revival. Judeo-Tat, mountain Jews from the Caucasus, and 60,000 Israelis speak Judeo-Georgian, a mixture of Hebrew and the Georgian language. I'm sure that's not all, but you get the idea as far as the Jewish languages go. However, there are other languages that have come to Israel with people coming back. Olim, meaning those people who have made aliyah or come back to Israel. And all Olim have this right of return by law in Israel. And they've come back with languages from all over the world, every race and background you can imagine. 130,000 Ethiopian Jews have brought their language, Amharic, a South Semitic language, back with them. Romanian, though it's unsure how many Romanians came in because they were a bit sneaky and sly and a bit... I mean, if there's any Romanians watching, you know, I see you, yeah. 100,000, 120,000 Romanian speakers across Israel. I mean, that's big, right? There used to be a huge Jewish community in Persia, Iran. 135,000 Jews in Israel speak this language, Persian, and 20,000 Mizrahi speakers, mainly concentrated in Derona and Beersheba, and a few thousand Armenian speakers. It's no surprise that you get Ukrainian speakers, Polish speakers as well. 77,000 Hungarian Jews have brought their language from Hungary. And 100,000 Israelis speak German as a first language. I think that's quite remarkable and a beautiful testimony to survival and cultural renewal. And even the Goethe Institute, to do with the German language, has opened up a branch in Israel. And from what I understand, studying German is becoming more popular in Israel. So may that bridge between those two countries continue. As you can see, that list could go on and on. But the melting pot of earlier Israeli history has been changed into more of a live and let speak attitude. And I think that's a good thing, because these groups will slowly be absorbed into Hebrew over time. The Hebrew language is safe now, so it's able to back off and let people have their communities and slowly, more naturally be absorbed into Hebrew. And that can only make Hebrew and Israel stronger and more unified, I believe, as time goes on. Question: do you speak any of the languages I mentioned in this video? Or would you like to learn any of the Jewish languages? Let me know down in the comments. Were any surprising to you? And as always, I'd like to thank my Patreons. Thank you very much for your contribution, and if you'd like to join me, I'll put a link down below. Thanks for your support. We'll see you in the next episode. Huval Ramatro.